Here, the first thing to notice is that you don't just have x to a number in the numerator, you have a square root. So you're always going to want to convert any radicals that you have. Now, if you have a square root, when you hear square, you think 2. So a square root has an understood index of 2, and then, of course, x has an understood power of 1. So when you make this conversion, the way that I think about this is I think about everything stays the same except for the denominator. The denominator is going to give us the index that we have. So it's the power over the index. So what will happen here is everything's going to stay the same, and this little index is just going to scoot up into the denominator. So it'll be x to the 1/2. And then the 12, of course, is just going to tag along for the right. Now, that is not our derivative. That is just our rewritten problem with the index, or with the radical, converted into a fraction exponent. So once you have that converted out of the radical form, then we're going to take the derivative. And when we take the derivative, the 12, of course, is a constant with something, so it's going to tag along. And then we're going to bring the 1/2 down. So when you bring the 1/2 down, you're going to have 12 times 1/2, and then x, and then here you're going to subtract 1 from the exponent. So you are going to have 1/2 minus 1. Now, you have a fraction minus a whole number, so you have to get a common denominator. So you'll multiply this 1 by 2 over 2. And so you're really looking at 1/2 minus 2 over 2, subtract the numerator to get -1 over the common denominator of 2. So that tells us that the new exponent, when we subtract 1 from the exponent, is going to be -1/2. Now, you cannot type that in because you have this 12 times the 1/2 situation. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 12, and remember, fractions multiply straight across. So this is 12 times 1 over 1 times 2. So that would be 12 over 2 x to the -1/2, which of course is just 6x to the -1/2. Now, you can probably type that in and they're going to be happy with you. I do want to remind you, though, that there are other representations for this. You could rewrite this, and this would be perfectly acceptable on your test, just for the record. Like, if you wanted to leave it like that, that would be perfectly fine. But another representation is you could move the negative exponent down to the denominator to become positive. And then remember how the x to the 1/2 was just the same thing as the square root. So what you could do also as another representation is you could have 6 over, and this x to the 1/2 would become the square root of x. So any of these three are perfectly acceptable for the test. MyMathLab is probably going to be okay with this one. Usually what they do is they convert, like if you start with a radical, they're going to end with a radical. But again, this is perfectly acceptable for your test.